This is the first complex topic we'll think about. Who controls the meaning? And as you read the chapter, you remember that there's different views on this. So I want to approach it by introducing you to some folks called the Naphtunkians. I got this story out of a book on hermeneutics by Henry Virkler years ago. And you can see when it begins, as you once wrote a letter, that it must be an older book. It's supposed to be an email today or sent a text. But follow along. So you once wrote a letter, this is your letter, to a close friend. En route to his destination, the Postal Service lost your message. Apologies to any children of postal workers here. And remained lost for the next 2,000 years amidst nuclear wars and other historical transitions. One day it's discovered and reclaimed. Three poets from the contemporary Naphtunkian society translate your letter separately, but unfortunately arrive at three different meanings. What this means to me, says Tunky 1, is, I disagree, says Tunky 2. What this means to me is, you're both wrong, claims Tunky 3. My interpretation is the correct one. Now, as a dispassionate observer, you don't really care all that much, viewing the controversy from your celestial, at least we hope you're up in heaven, perspective, what advice would you like to give the Tunkies to resolve their differences? We'll assume that you've been a fairly articulate writer. That is, when you wrote, it made sense to people. So, is it possible your letter actually had more than one valid meaning? Remember, this is your letter. So, you could say that maybe two or all three of the Naphtunkians all had a valid meaning, even though their meanings were different. If your answer is yes, you go on to question 2 here. If it's no, go to 3. Well, let's just pretend our answer is yes and go to 2. So, if your letter can have a variety of meanings, is there any limit on the number of valid meanings? And if there's a limit, what criteria would you propose to differentiate between valid and invalid? So you say, yeah, well, there's more than one. Okay, are there a million? Or are there a few? And how would the Naphtunkian figure out how many meanings there are? Okay, we take the other option. If you say, no, my letter does not have more than one valid meaning. So if there's only one, then what criteria will you use to discern whether Tunky 1, 2, or 3 has the best interpretation? And if you decide that Tunky 2 has the best interpretation, how will you justify this to Tunkies 1 and 3? So here's the situation. Let's go back a couple of slides. Your letter. Lost. Found. Found with different meanings. Is there a way out of this? So more than one, yes or no? Any limit if you say yes? If you say no, what criteria? How will you convince Tunky 1 and 3 that they're wrong and Tunky 2 is right? Well, we've worked on that a little bit in class. And so I want you to think for a few minutes. Let's say that you really thought that Tunky 2 had it. How would you convince the other Naphtunkians? What would they need to come up with a meaning that's valid, the meaning that you meant? Well, when you think about that, the video finishes, take a look at what we have down below. There's an answer garden down there. And I want you to click on the answer garden and answer the question. How would you help the Naphtunkians? What sort of tools, knowledge, skills, what did they need to figure out your letter?